Hello, everybody. Welcome to our SDG Week 2022. We are very excited to hold this SDG Week at INSEAD for the fourth year in a row. And we're also super excited to kick it off with 3 sessions today with many alumni of INSEAD also with us to show how they're pushing the agenda towards the SDGs. We'll start today with Pierre-François Thaler, who's going to talk to us about how to push sustainability in global supply chains. Before we start, I want and I need to give you a little bit of housekeeping information. So you are all muted, as you can see, and your videos are off. If you want to ask questions, use the Q&A tab. They will be appearing. You can also order them or support them so that then we know which one to pick when we open the conversation to the audience with Pierre-François a little bit later. Okay, the webinar is being recorded also, just so you know, so that we can post it afterwards on our YouTube channel. So that's about it for the housekeeping. I am very excited to now hand over to our very own Dean of INSEAD, Ilian Mihov, who is the big supporter of SDGs on campus, and he's going to open this session again this year. Over to you, Ilian, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, Catel. I'm also supporting the SDGs off campus, not only on campus. I think it is important to have our support everywhere where we can. So first of all, I must say it is a great honor to welcome all of you to the opening of this SDG Week 2022. Thank you for your time and thank you for joining us today. You can look forward to 3 days of discussion and debate around the role of business in helping achieve the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals. As you know, this week started 4 years ago. It's organized by the wonderful people from the Hoffman Global Institute for Business and Society, as well as co-designed with 7 student clubs, the MIM students, and it is supported by Accenture Strategy. We have a wonderful program, discussions, debates, covering a lot of things from the impact of climate change on Africa to the importance of investing in inclusion. We're just a few days before the start of COP27, the 4th edition of this SDG Week is preceding COP27, and I think it's a really timely opportunity to reflect where we are heading in reaching the goals, how we can build a better, more equitable and more sustainable future for everyone. And let's hope that COP27 will come with more ideas and more action points in order to stop the climate change that we have been observing in recent years. As the business school for the world, we have a strong responsibility and obligation to contribute towards this crucial debate. We have to find solutions. In many speeches, I have shown you maps of our alumni community around the world. And given that it's a global problem, we have to use our global network to find solutions. You know that time is running out. A recent report of the Environmental Program of the United Nations revealed that currently, to quote, there is no credible pathway to 1.5 degrees in place, and that the only way to limit the worst impacts of the climate crisis is a very rapid transformation of societies. Governments do have a moral obligation to act and to identify the necessary solutions and to implement change. But you've heard me many times to say that I believe that governments alone cannot do this by themselves. We need also businesses to contribute to this change. I firmly believe that we are building these skills in our programs. I firmly believe that in our community, we have the people who can actually help drive this innovation that is required in order to achieve the societal transformation that we are hoping for. It is not possible for this transformation to happen without the private sector. You know that since its foundation, INSEAD's central mission has been to develop responsible leaders, innovators, entrepreneurs who can drive real change and transform business and society. Today, I think that our mission has never been so important. As the world confronts the unprecedented challenges, we need to ensure that we are helping our students, our participants, our alumni, not just giving them the right knowledge and tools, but also the right values and the desire, the courage to drive us towards a sustainable future. And as you'll hear later on, we do have examples of this kind of alumni in our community. For us, when we built the Hoffman Global Institute for Business and Society, one of the key pillars, in addition to the research and teaching pillars, one of the key pillars was to make sure that we reach out to the community. So we, for us, the SDG Week is an example of how INSEAD looks to educate, engage, and inspire students, staff, faculty, the community out there, the alumni community, but not only the alumni community. It is an INSEAD initiative, but it's not only for INSEAD. We have to change mindsets and build skills across the entire world. For example, one of the SDGs, as you know, SDG 5 is focusing on gender equality. We will be hosting a number of discussions that provide very concrete ways that we can work towards in advancing this goal. This year's edition is extra special as it marks the first chance we have had to host in-person events both in Singapore and in France, in both campuses, in 3 years. And we have an impressive lineup of talks available. In our first for SDG Week, we will be launching our Global Talent Competitiveness Index. The report for 2022 will be launched during this week. Our panelists will be considering the findings and debating the findings from the 9th edition of this important report that looks at skills, skill gaps, talent in 133 countries and 175 cities. And then they will debate how economic and geopolitical uncertainty are in fact further widening the growing talent divide between countries. There is also the chance to hear from the authors of the systems work of social change, our MBA alumna Cynthia Reiner and Professor Francois Bonici. Their workshop will dive into the principles and practices of systems work, an approach that harnesses connection, context, and power to help people and communities to create responsive and representative social systems. These are just two examples of a very packed program, the full details of which will be shared at the end of the session today. As you can imagine, there'll be a lot of really exciting and interesting talks, but without any further ado, let me just go and discuss our first keynote address, which will be given by our own MBA alumnus from 1999D, Pierre-Francois Thaler, who is the co-CEO and the co-founder of EcoVadis. Founded in 2007, EcoVadis is the only universal global sustainability ratings provider, offering a common platform, scorecard, benchmarks, and performance improvement tools. I feel so proud, and I think that our community feels so proud that Pierre-Francois is one of the founders of such an important organization in the drive towards a more sustainable future, because without measurement, it's very difficult to change. Their game-changing approach has been explored in a case study by INSEAD called EcoVadis, a sustainability rating company goes global. We actually will share with the participants today, we'll share this case study at the end of the session. EcoVadis now collaborates with tens of thousands of organizations, including INSEAD, to help them improve their sustainability practices in a range of areas. We started being rated by them a few years back. We got an okay score, but not really that great. But we learned from EcoVadis how to improve. And I must say that it's a very proud moment this year that the school was awarded a gold medal status. And it's not because Pierre-François is an alumnus. Actually, for a few years, our rating was not that great. But it's because of all the improvements that our staff, our students, our faculty have implemented. As I said, I think that without measurement, it's very difficult to move forward. So I'm a big fan of using data to be able to make informed decisions. And I have long expressed the vital need to develop universal frameworks so that we can compare progress and work towards common goals across organizations and around the globe. Through EcoVadis, Pierre-François and his team have made a vital contribution to this area. Pierre-François has also been a very dedicated and committed supporter of INSEAD and the Hoffman Institute over the years, for which I want to personally thank him. He's a perfect example of how our alumni, the INSEAD community, can help lead this change that we so desperately need. And I'm looking forward to hearing him talk about how we can leverage the power of the global supply chains to drive big-scale change on sustainability. And also hearing his advice on how you, as MBAs, those of you who are in the audience, can make a difference by leading change in your organizations as executives, as entrepreneurs, or as intrapreneurs. We can all make a positive difference, no matter how daunting the current situation looks. I therefore urge members of the INSEAD community to get involved in the important conversations taking place during this week. By coming together as a community, we can identify the possible solutions, and just as importantly, our shared values that are required to drive the change that we need and demonstrate the power of business to be a force for good. Together, we can help bring the world closer to achieving the sustainability development goals. And now it is my great pleasure to hand over to Pierre-François. Pierre-François, the floor is yours. The screen is yours.
Thank you, Ilian, and thanks for your kind words. I'm incredibly humbled to be here, and after having studied at INSEAD and seeing all the amazing speakers we were getting when we were on campus. I think there is no greater recognition than being invited to address all of you in this SDG week kickoff, and maybe also because I think we owe a lot of success and what we've done to the INSEAD relationship, and I could elaborate on all the things we've done. I'm in Tokyo today. I'm calling you from the EcoVadis office in Tokyo. So sorry not to be on campus, but yes, we have a lot to INSEAD. You were mentioning this INSEAD case study that was written a couple of years ago. I was yesterday with Professor Sungai from a prestigious Kyoto University, and he was explaining me how he's been teaching the INSEAD, the EcoVadis case study to his marketing students for the past couple of years, in Japanese. And so, I think it's, amazing. So what I want to do today is share with you two things. First, what can be the transformative power of global value chains to drive sustainability improvements? This is a space which is often ignored, which is not really in the spotlight, and which has massive impact to drive change. And second, I want to talk about what it can mean for all of you, MBAs, alumni, and what you could do to drive more change through the different organizations you work with. So, where to start? Maybe reflecting about on what I see, or what I've seen in the past couple of years. I want to start with some good news and then some bad news. So let's start with the good news. ESG is everywhere. Sustainability is in every corporate report. The number of companies, or the number of large global companies who are recruiting on campus, who are reporting on their sustainability commitments, is at an all-time high. when I look at investors, you have trillions of dollars which have been invested in ESG funds. When I look at, I'm in the Tokyo office. I was reading the newspaper. That's a Nikkei newspaper, and in Nikkei newspaper they talk about the Nikkei SDG festival. So even in Japan, topics like SDGs are really frontline in the newspaper. So that's great news, and this is a radical change from just 3-4 years ago. 3-4 years ago, the narrative was quite different. Now, really, every company is taking this topic seriously, and every service provider as well. When I talk to Microsoft, when I talk to Salesforce, when I talk to Google, Amazon, they're all launching new solutions on sustainability. So that's the good news. Now, here comes the bad news. When we look at some of the most important sustainability metrics of the planet, things are not going in the right direction. Ilian was talking about the COP27 and the depressing report, which was published last week. Carbon emissions keep increasing, and there was smaller remit a couple of during COVID, but it's increasing again. When I look at topics like global inequalities, the gap is widening. So despite all the engagement, despite all the commitments of companies, change is not happening. So why is that? I think there are a number of reasons. We could talk about many different factors, but I think one important factor is most of the focus of investors, most of the focus of NGOs, most of the focus of regulators has been on the big brands. It's always about Unilever and General Motors and Nissan and Schneider Electric. All the attention is on what are those big companies doing. We're talking about the FTSE 100, the S&P 500, the largest 10,000 companies in the world. Unfortunately, those companies, it's only the tip of the iceberg. When we look at topics like carbon emissions, those 10,000 companies, they're only responsible for a small portion of global emissions. Multiple reports, including the recent Carbon Disclosure Project report, have shown that 80% of carbon emissions are actually happening in the upstream value chain. And if we look at topics like human rights, I think it's even worse. I think 90%, 95% of human rights violations are actually not in the, within those large companies' organizations, but in the upstream supply chain of those companies. So all of the focus is on a couple of thousands of big companies, whereas most of the change needs to happen with millions of other small and private and smaller size businesses. This is where we need to drive change, and this is where we need to drive change at scale. So leveraging global value chains, which is a topic which is often ignored or not really understood. If you look at global 2000 companies, they work with thousands of business partners. Actually, the average number of suppliers of a global 2000 is around 30,000 businesses. So each of those companies can actually influence 30,000 businesses to drive improvements in sustainability. So they can drive change on a really scalable way. But they also have a much more important influence than one thinks. I was looking last week at a Gartner report. Gartner was doing a quick survey of all their members, asking what would be the impact of the coming crisis on sustainability. And when we look in this Gartner report at what are the biggest stakeholders who can push businesses to change, it's not NGOs, it's not regulators, it's not employees, it's not even investors. I think investors come number 2 or number 3. The biggest drivers of change for businesses are customers. When customers ask you to do things, you take this into account and you really, change your practices. So that's what EcoVadis set doing 15 years ago now. So our vision was to create a platform to help chief procurement officers, chief supply chain officers to manage the risk in their extended value chain and to drive sustainability improvements. So how do we do this? We do this through ratings and scores. You know, one of the things I learned at INSEAD is the power of ratings and rankings. You know, when I was there, incredibly focused on our GMAT scores, on the MBA rankings, on the academic scores. And, you know, scores are a very powerful way to drive behavioral change. So the big part of what we do is providing those ratings, but we also, if we wanted to drive change, needed to create an online collaboration platform. We needed to create the system to connect all these businesses to make sure that large organizations like General Motors can not only access ratings of their suppliers' performance over the planet on ESG, but also provide the workflow and provide the tools to drive improvements. So this was not an easy start, to be honest. We were a group of 3-4 people in 2007. That was the middle of the last financial crisis. Actually, companies were much more concerned about whether their suppliers would still be alive next month than taking care of sustainability. We had no funding at the time. We had to bootstrap the businesses. And most importantly, we were facing a bit chicken and the egg problem. The big buyers were telling us, okay, your idea is very interesting, but show us, all the suppliers you have in the system, and all the suppliers, all the businesses were telling us, okay, that's interesting, but what are the buyers? So we had a bit of a, liquidity or marketplace liquidity problem. But we stick to our vision. We were quite patient for the first couple of years to keep, developing the methodology, to keep developing the ratings. And then we were able to progressively crack the code. We were able to scale, and starting 5-6 years ago, we've seen a real acceleration. We've seen the business growing, faster and faster. And fast forward to today. So today we're a team of 1,400 people globally, 13 offices around the world. Here I'm the Tokyo office, which is a bit quiet because it's 8:30 now at night. We work with 1,000 of the largest procurement organizations, big global 500 companies who are using our platform to access to reliable data on their business partners' performance. And we have 100,000 customers, which are rated businesses, companies who are subscribing to our platform because they were invited by one of their important business partners to receive a rating, as INSEAD did, for the first time a couple of years ago. And to give you another metric on the magnitude of the platform we have today, those 1,000 buyers who are using the platform, they represent an annual purchasing volume of $3 trillion. They spend every year $3 trillion on goods and services, and $3 trillion is, I think the more than the GDP of most countries, except maybe China and US. And our goal is to be able to influence some of this. Make sure that through our ratings we can push some of those billions of dollars spent towards more sustainable businesses. So that's that's where we are. That's what the platform is doing. And to give you maybe a more concrete example of the change we see happening, I will take the example of carbon. So last year or 18 months ago, we've been working for the past 15 years measuring all sorts of ESG metrics, but we realized that on carbon we needed to dive much further, and we needed to go to provide much more granular information on carbon. So we launched a new module, a new platform called Carbon Action Module to push companies to really disclose data on carbon. We set a target for 2022 to have 15,000 businesses disclosing on carbon on the platform. And as of today, we are at 11,000 or close to 12,000. So already a big scale. And what we've seen is the maturity of those private companies, the maturity of those mid-sized companies on carbon is unfortunately very low. But through the metrics, through the ratings we provide, through the network, working with the big procurement organizations, we've been able to see that 80% of those businesses which were already engaged for the second year in the program were actually improving, going from not doing much to starting to take commitments, to start to set targets, to start to increase their purchasing of renewable energy. So that's concrete changes we're able to implement. So what's ahead for EcoVadis? We think the time is coming for us to accelerate and to double down and to do even more. So last July, there were two important changes for the business. The first one is we announced a new investment round of $500 million, to really, fuel the company and to really allow us to, invest in a number of areas. And at the same time, we decided that we wanted to become a société entreprise à mission, which the French legal status similar to a benefit corporation, and we embedded our new mission, which is guiding all companies toward a sustainable world, in the bylaws of the companies. So what's the plan? What are we going to do with those massive resources? It's a number of things for the next couple of years. The first one is investing in tech and AI. We think that if we want to go from 100,000 businesses, as we do today, to millions of businesses, we need to automate even further. We need to find ways to, get data further up the supply chain. We need to make the system, even more scalable. So that's a big, big priority for us. Second strategic focus is we want to deep dive on some of the topics, some of the SDGs, which are really, material for, corporates. So I talked about carbon. This will remain a very important focus for us. We are looking at human rights. How can we access to better data on human rights practices of companies around the world? We are looking at specific tools and specific ratings on diversity. Diversity is a huge topic, not only in North America, but it's becoming a global topic. Maybe not so much in Japan yet, but it will come. And lastly, we are working on new use cases. For the past 15 years, we've been focused on providing the platform, allowing every large company to connect with all of their business partners. So it was mainly working with the procurement and supply chain organizations. But now we start to see new use cases. In the past 18 months, we started working with large banks like JP Morgan, Citi, BNPP, Société Générale. We are using our platform to measure not only the performance of their suppliers, but measure the performance of their customers and provide new, sustainable improvement loans, or provide financial. It's mainly around the debt and loans, where the interest rate of the loans are reduced, depending on the improvement in the ESG score as measured by EcoVadis. We are starting to do this as well in the private equity world, working with the GPs and allowing them to measure the ESG performance of their portfolio companies, all over the planet. So it's still a long way for EcoVadis. We think we are, still barely scratching the surface, but the business is really, accelerating. And for 2023, we are planning to grow, more than 50%. So that's about EcoVadis. So what does it, what does it mean for you? What does alumni, MBAs, whether you're still on campus or you're still in a large corporation? So first, maybe you should pay attention to those operations and supply chain classes. I remember when I was on campus, we were all going for the strategy classes and marketing and finance and entrepreneurship. Operations and supply chain was maybe not the sexiest of topics, but it's actually a very important one. When we talk about sustainability, which is so much about resources efficiency, so much about creating closed loops, operations and supply chain are a huge part of the solution. So yeah, encourage you all, to engage with this. Second idea is, whether you're planning to join a company or whether you're already working for a large corporate, challenge, your operations and supply chain colleagues. What are they doing, to mobilize not only employees in your company, but teams and resources with the thousands of business partners you are doing business with. And of course, we'll be very happy to support this, but whether you do it with EcoVadis or independently, it's a huge lever for scale. And maybe lastly, and most importantly, I think we need more entrepreneurs, and we need more intrapreneurs. We can drive this type of change, creating innovative tools and innovative business processes in your organizations. And what I see in the skill set we have at INSEAD, what we've learned and the profiles we have is helping us, or is positioning us in a really right way to solve a big part of the problem. So when I look at what needs to be done in the next 10, 20 years, or the target for SDGs is now 8 years away, 3 types of changes need to happen at the same time. So the first one, we need a regulation. We need a price on carbon. We need new laws, and this starts to happen. I was referring last week to a new regulation or new standard, which is maybe not that sexy, but it's IFRS. I think in the accounting classes, we might be studying IFRS. IFRS voted last week to decide that scope 3 emissions, or emissions from the upstream value chain, need to be part of the accounting reports of companies. That's an important change. So regulation is an important part of the equation, but probably at INSEAD we are not the most the best position to influence those regulations. Second type of change, we need breakthrough innovations. We need breakthrough innovations in materials, in energy, in transportation. That's really engineering. And here also, it's more for engineers but regulations and breakthrough technologies are not going to be enough. We need a third type of change. The third type of change is creating new incentives and new business processes and new metrics to push companies and to push businesses and to push consumers to change their purchasing behaviors and to change the way they buy in a very radical way in the next 5 to 10 years. And that's where I think we have a great skill set. That's really the model of EcoVadis. EcoVadis is not about clean tech and a breakthrough technical innovation. It's changing the business incentives. And we have already some great examples of alumni and companies who have pioneered and who have engaged in this type of sustainability innovation. Maybe one of the most famous one is Frédéric Mazzella from BlaBlaCar, MBA 2007, I think, a couple of years after us, who founded BlaBlaCar and with carpooling service now is supporting 70 million members all over the world and has helped saved, I think 10 or 15 million tons of CO2 in a single year. it was a great innovation. There were it took a bit of time to get adoption. I think the changes of the past 2 years have really pushed BlaBlaCar to scale. But this type of tools is really changing purchasing behavior and behavior of consumers in this case. Another example closer to us is David Nathaker, MBA 2015. He created Sender, a digital road freight forwarder who connects shippers with carriers through software, and providing a piece of technology and a piece of software, creating this on this freight forwarder shipper relationship can have a great impact on CO2 emissions in the global supply chain. So that's another example of technology which is changing business practices. And the last one, Catel was very kind to share with me last week, because I don't know them. Is very recently, I think it was last year, Marcelo Lutz and Roberto Biselli, MBA 21, they co-founded Capim, which is providing in Latin America a very innovative solution to offer buy now, pay later services for healthcare services in Latin America. We talked about a lot about carbon, but there's a lot of change also needed to reduce global inequalities. And Capim was recently named 2021 most disruptive MBA startup by Post and Quants, and they won the INSEAD venture competition, as I think we did in 2000 for not for EcoVadis, for the first company I started right out of INSEAD. But I wish them all the success we can. So those are a couple of examples. We need hundreds. We need thousands of innovators. We need thousands of entrepreneurs who will help creating new tools to address this third dimension, changing business practices, pushing companies to change the way they buy, or pushing consumers to change the way they consume and the way they procure goods and services. So, and I'll finish by this. I think the next 10, 15 years are going to be game-changing for businesses. I think there is no better time to leverage your business skills and be part of the change, be leading the change. I think the way INSEAD defined this force for good mission a couple of years ago, that's something you can all be part of. And if we can inspire you, or if we can share some advice on our experience, I'll be very happy to do this. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Pierre-François, for sharing your experience, and so thanks also for connecting to what INSEAD brought you as you went along the way, taking part of some initiatives we already have on campus. I was wondering if your idea of EcoVadis was also already an idea you had when you were a student at INSEAD.
Not at all. Not at all. When I was at INSEAD, I started the first business, right out of INSEAD with 4 others, MBAs. We started B2Build, which was a B2B marketplace for the construction industry, connecting buyers and suppliers for this specific industry. So the marketplace model, the model of EcoVadis was already there. What was a bit different is one, we failed miserably, or we started the company at the peak of the internet bubble. We raised lots of cash. We burnt all the cash very quickly, and we did lots of mistakes, but we learned a lot. And I think lots of the learning helped us to do things in a different way with EcoVadis.
Right, thanks for sharing that experience and the failing part as well, so that it keeps on also encouraging students on campus now to try their hands also at setting up startups while they're on campus, because that's also the time to learn. So thanks for that. We have some questions coming up, and I'm going to take them and share them with you. Jenny is asking, I mean, you said in your call to action, challenge your supplier, challenge your procurement team and your supply team to change things. But Jenny is asking, how do company move from their present position where they do not take responsibility for the practices of their supplier and their value chain partners, as reflected in their terms and conditions of services? So how do we take them on board? How does that work concretely in companies, this shift?
So we work now with 1,000 large procurement organizations, and we work with companies who are at very different stages of maturity. We've been working with we are working with companies like Unilever and Schneider Electric, and we have been doing this for many years before EcoVadis, and we are also working with companies who are brand new to this topic. They just understand what sustainable supply chain is. So that's I'm in Tokyo this week, and I'm in Japan this week. We are working with a number of Japanese companies where it's really a new topic. So the steps we take is, first, in the first year, we help provide a snapshot of what the performance of their key business partners are, and that's dashboard with the good and bad things. Second, we help them change their business processes. So we help them change, for example, the way they run RFPs, to make sure that in the RFPs now they factor sustainability score as 10%, 20% of their purchasing processes. We help them connect our data with their ERPs and their procurement systems. And then only year 2, year 3, and year 4, we work with them to set improvement targets, because very few of those organizations are saying, okay, we want to get the data to get rid of companies who have who have bad scores, because that's very costly to change suppliers. So most of the time the objective is, how can we use this tool to drive improvements? How can we Ilian was taking the example of INSEAD. That's very common. The first time companies are invited, they have not formalized a lot of things, or they are focusing on specific SDGs, but not having a broader topic. So through the platform, through the benchmarks we provide, through new digital tools we have developed, like a digital academy, we are helping provide support and in an electronic way or in a digital way to all these companies to improve.
Okay, so you offer some information for benchmarking, and you also accompany the customers that you have with webinars. I mean, I've seen some of them. We also attended some of them for us, showcasing how to push that change. Jenny is also asking, okay, you've said that as customers, we have the most influence on, on sustainability. But what if customers do not have alternatives on where to procure their services from? And she said that it could be the case in developing countries as well. So how do you push that change when there are no alternatives for procurement? Is that a real issue, number one? And then if yes, how do you operate?
Yes, so it's the concept of sole source. In a number of cases, suppliers are actually more powerful than the customers. Yeah. We've been working a lot in the telecom industry, with Vodafone and Orange and Deutsche Telekom and the NTT here in Japan. I think telecom industry is a good example where the key suppliers, Apple and Samsung, and are actually much stronger than most of the customers' organization. So what we've been doing in this case is helping create coalitions or communities of those large buyers, so that they can have a common message. So maybe Vodafone, even though they are one of the largest company in the world, they're difficult for them to influence Samsung or Huawei to change. But when Vodafone, together with 25 or 35 other telecom companies using our platform as a common message, saying, okay, that's what we need to see as improvements, that's changing the discussion. So it's basically, aggregating aggregating customer demand or customer request, through a single, through a common message, because the EcoVadis ratings and the EcoVadis scorecard are a way to create a common standard for those companies to discuss with their supplier, so that they can still have an influence.
Okay, yes, so creating these coalitions, okay, interesting. Still, I mean, and as you didn't really answer that part of the question, Adrian's question is also focusing on developing countries and or emerging economies. Let's broaden it. He's asking, what are the challenges of pushing the ESG sustainability agenda in companies operating in this jurisdiction? Is this harder there than in Europe, for instance? And what are the key challenges that stand in the way for pushing that agenda, including in supply chains in emerging economies?
No, so in emerging countries, of course, they are often not equipped. They are the understanding of those topics, the resources they have to invest on reducing waste, reducing, improving health and safety conditions are a bit different. But what we see is very often in those geographies, you still have, companies who are performing quite differently. And I'm in Tokyo this week, we are discussing a lot with the Japanese company on China. China is the #1 market for EcoVadis in terms of companies we rate. And one interesting thing we've seen in China for the past couple of years is when you look at in every single country, when you look at the performance of companies, you have a kind of what do you call it, a normal distribution curve, as we like it in INSEAD. You have very few companies at the extreme and a lot of companies in the middle. What we've seen in China, what we're seeing in China is actually we start to see like a double bell curve with two different groups of companies. You have many businesses in China who understand that this topic is really important for global customers. They are growing. They're able to invest in new factories, in new business, in new manufacturing processes, and they, for some of them, are doing better than even companies in Europe. So even in those countries, you still have a way to differentiate between companies.
And so I see for China, can I push a little bit for maybe less developed economies even?
If we talk about Africa, for example,
right.
Africa, we have very little engagement in Africa. We have very little coverage in Africa. When I look at the supply chain of many of our customers, except for smallholder farmers, which is a totally different type of companies. We're not engaging with smallholder farmers. But so on Africa, for example, I think it's less than 5% of the businesses we engage. So in those countries, it's still very difficult to get reliable information. So yes, we are able to cover most countries. You still have big, some countries where it's much more difficult.
Yeah, thanks. And I think this geographical difference is important also to understand where potentially some entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship can happen when we speak to our current MBA and Master in Management students. Right, these are conversations that we will have also later in the SDG week on how to push that agenda in different type of economies. I think that's a very important topic. Paul is asking us a question, a little bit more generic question, wondering how can the supply chain transformation encourage us all, so I'm assuming, us as basic customers, to consume and reuse fewer, better quality, longer lasting products and services?
So EcoVadis is really B2B. We are really trying to solve this part of one part of the equation, which is all the B2B relationships in terms of influencing customers. That's not what we do today, or that's not what we are not providing our data for end users. We want to make sure that it's understood that the rating for businesses, not a rating for products. You have a lot of greenwashing sometimes, where companies use the company rating to put a label on the product, and so we are not able to really rate product for consumers. So that's
out of your scope. Do you see a role for customers directly to try to push that change all the way to value chains of organizations, or is it too far?
Sorry?
Do you see a role for direct customers to push that change, even though it's not in directly what EcoVadis is doing, or are we way too far?
No, I think of course, one of the biggest driver of change, I was talking about customers, but it's consumers. For one of the reason Unilever and Nestlé and Marx and Mondelez, they engage in this is because at the end it's customers who are asking questions on provenance of products and sustainability characteristic of products. So that's a big driver. Engaging consumers requires different type of tools. We've seen a number of initiatives, like Yuka in France or Good Guide in the US, who are trying to provide easy tools for consumers. I think there is one challenge with consumers. The sustainability topic is very complex. In the B2B world, we are already able to simplify it in a way so that it's understood by B2B, but for consumers, you need to make it even simpler. The consumer at the end, they would like to have a, very simple, okay, not okay, which is not easy to do because sustainability is multidimensional and it's about, health and human rights. And so it's, changing part of the problem.
Exactly. And what kind of label and certification that we can use all the way down to consumers. So the different questions from Ignacio, but still on this, on the plethora of tools we have to certify and to rate and rank. Ignacio is saying certification are a great way to drive change. There are dozens of them. I think he's reasonable. There are probably hundreds of them: B Corp, ISO, CSR rating, EcoVadis, etc. Which one are the most relevant for you and why? I think you've explained how EcoVadis has a particular niche in that broader landscape. But what do you think of this plethora of systems that exist today?
We are starting to see a bit of consolidation, actually. So, for example, so you have different type of ratings for different type of use case. The one of the most well-known is ESG ratings for investors. Investors want to understand ESG performance of capital markets or publicly listed companies. This was hugely fragmented. You had dozens and dozens of players in the past. 5 years, this has been consolidated by S&P, Moody's, Morningstar. So, well, I don't know if it's good or bad, but there are now a handful, or only 3 or 4, significant ESG rating for investors, and they're all part now of. They've all been acquired by the big credit rating agencies. EcoVadis, we're playing a different category. It's ESG ratings or sustainability rating for B2B relationships, for companies, for corporates doing business with other corporates, and then you have specific ones like B Corp. B Corp is a great initiative, more focused on the recognizing the super committed companies, purpose-led businesses, and it's very complementary to what we do. But if you really look at coverage, scale, the size of those or the impact of those companies, you actually have probably a dozen now, not hundreds. And should it be less than a dozen? Probably not, because you still want to have a good level of competition and good level of innovation in this space.
You were right on the dozen, Ignacio. I was wrong. Thanks. Sorry about that. We need to wrap up now, even though people are coming with more questions. But I guess if I try to wrap up in terms of what are asking, and I'm going to ask a very short answer from you. What do you see as the most important measure that could be taken now, either by companies or by government, to push that agenda much faster? What's the one measure you would dream of having to push that agenda much faster? If you had one choice.
If I want one choice, it will be on carbon. You know, I think that's the mother of all. Not the mother, but that's the number one problem we need to solve, and it will be, you know, having you know, all companies disclosing reliable greenhouse gas emissions, so we can really have a quantitative approach to this topic, and we are very far from this. You know, only out of all the businesses we rate, less than 15% are able to provide reliable carbon data today. So long way to go.
Yeah, thank you very much, Pierre-François, for sharing your experience. Thanks for joining us late from Tokyo today. Thank you also to our sponsor, Accenture Strategy. Thanks, Eliane, for opening the SDG Week. We're wrapping up now, and I'm not taking more time for questions, even though there are still some unanswered, and we'll share them with you, Pierre-François, in case you want to answer to them offline, because we need now to move, and we are moving in our SDG Week to an event held by our Master in Management 2023, talking and launching, actually they launched it yesterday or earlier this week, the Climate Run. We'll be discussing how to fight climate change through technology. Here you can see also some great speakers coming on campus in Fontainebleau. If you are on Fontainebleau, meet us now in Amphi Rebili, that's a former Amphi B. Otherwise, you can also join us online for this session that will be moderated by our very own Chenyi, Professor of Strategy. Later today at 7 p.m., we will be again welcoming one alumna back to campus, Cynthia Renner, who is together with François Bonici, will come to present their new book on how to move from individual initiatives to really system change. They develop a recipe for that in that book. So come and join us, same thing on campus or online for this session. With this, we're going to wrap that session. As you will exit the session, you will receive a poll from Qualtrics to respond to. Take a minute, please, to share what you thought of this session, what you would like to see us provide you in upcoming SDG Weeks. Thank you very much for joining us, and goodbye to everybody.